the MBA is proud to partner with like-minded organizations, as we often do, to promote free market principles, and today would not be possible without today's partner and our sponsor, our very good friends at Americans for Prosperity. For those of you that are not as familiar as we are with Americans for Prosperity, I'd like to introduce my dear friend and the State Director of Pennsylvania, Emily Green, up to share a little bit more about what they do and introduce this afternoon's panel. Emily? Absolutely.
Well, hello everyone. I am so excited to be in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I'm even more elated that it's not snowing today, so that's great. My name is Emily Green, and I have the pleasure of serving as State Director with Americans for Prosperity, Pennsylvania, one of 37 state chapters across the nation that has this crazy radical idea that businesses shouldn't be stifled by government overreach. Crazy, right? And we believe that you should be able to chart your own path. So, at Americans for Prosperity, we have looked at the political landscape. Where can we be the most effective in the grassroots? And we know that that is through working towards the extension of President Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So what does that mean for Pennsylvania? So if Congress does not get to work today to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, we could be facing a tax hike of $1,500. After 4 years of record high inflation, we believe at Americans for Prosperity, we can't afford that. For the business leaders in this room today, what that means is if we don't get to work to extend that, that could mean we lose up to 33,000 jobs across the Commonwealth. We have got to make sure that this is a priority of Congress, and we are so elated that Congressman Mike Kelly is in the room today. He has been a champion of this issue, so we're so grateful. And with that being said, I want to introduce our esteemed panelists. Congressman Mike Kelly, representing the 16th Congressional District, serves as a senior member of the House Ways and Means Committee and ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight. He is proud to be considered a leader amongst his colleagues and sits on numerous caucuses and is also an appointed member of the President's Export Council. So thank you so much, Congressman, for being here. We also have Senator Dan Laughlin, who was elected to the Pennsylvania State Senate in 2016 to represent the 49th Senatorial District, which includes nearly all of Erie County. Born in Erie and raised in the Erie Heights Housing Project, Senator Laughlin is the son of a decorated World War II combat veteran who worked as a union carpenter and a mother who assembled fighter planes at the Curtiss Wright plant in Buffalo. He serves as the chairman of the Senate Law and Justice Committee and vice chairman of the Game and Fisheries Committee and sits on numerous other committees. He and his wife Peggy have 3 children and attend Grace Church in McKean. Thank you, Senator, for being here. Next, we have Christine Blashock, who serves as the Chief Diversity and Community Development Officer with Erie Insurance. An Erie native, Christy earned her bachelor's degree from Case Western Reserve University, an MBA from Pace University, and her law degree from the Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace. And finally, we have Tom Treadway, the president of Erie Molded Packaging, a family-owned manufacturing business since 1982. Tom understands the impact of tax increases and weak tax policy on the manufacturing community, and will bring such an incredible perspective to this discussion. And then, of course, our fabulous and esteemed moderator, Jasmine Friend. Thank you so much for hosting us. And with that, I'd love to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Emily. All right, back at it. And a complete oversight on my part, Mr. Treadway is also on our board. I didn't forget about it. I was just thinking of, he's also on like a lot of other national boards as well. It's very impressive. And we're very fortunate he's actually in Erie today, I think just because the weather's a little nicer. Usually he's everywhere else in the country.
Enough, Eddie.
Well, we're going to get right into it, and you know, we'll start in no particular order. I just kind of have some interesting notes, and we'll allow some time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, write them down on the paper there. A member from AFP or our staff will come around and get them a little bit later. We'll start with Congressman Kelly, and thank you so much for making it. I know he has such a busy schedule. I have a few questions on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but you know, you have a unique situation in that you are a previous and business owner yourself, and owning a business and running all those operations is not something new to you that you had to learn about. You came up knowing all that. So could you talk maybe a little bit about really the benefits that came from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, why it was transformative, and why something like this helped even just your guys' operations?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First of all, I'll start off. When we talk about people who serve in an elected position, a friend of mine, when I first ran for office, said to me, I really don't believe anybody should be holding a public office unless they come up through the private sector and had worked on a commission-only pay scheme and lost their job at least once. Too much of the policy that's made is made by people who've never done what you do, never been through the bad times and the good times and survived it. Those are lessons you don't forget. I can tell you, when we were trying to put the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act together, and Chairman Brady would meet with him. We meet every day. We met every day, day in and day out. We stayed in Washington over the weekends. We worked long nights. I remember one time it dawned on me, and we were speaking, and my other colleagues were sitting there. I said, actually, Chairman, there's 2 times in my business life I didn't pay a penny in taxes. And he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He said, how did you get away with that? I said, we lost money that year. And so the key to everything, and when you talk about prosperity, prosperity is only prosperous if you are in fact profitable. This whole machine that we're working with, and when we talk about Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you know what we're going through right now? And this is not a slur, by the way, this is not putting anybody down. We have eliminated certain revenues, tax revenues. When the president was running for office, he said, we will not tax certain entities, and that's okay, but this is math. You can't have subtraction one place without addition someplace else. The gap between revenues that are raised and money that is spent is huge, and for all of us in the private sector, we say you could probably do that for a very short period of time, and you may get away with it once, but that's not a way to live life. So look, we know, when we're talking about Americans for Prosperity, we know there's a model that works. And as I said earlier, it's all math. It is just math. We can talk about all these different ins and outs and what we have tax policy on this issue and that issue and another issue, and we're not going to tax this and we're not going to tax that, yet we're still going to spend more money. And I think, gosh, that's an incredible business model. There's nobody in the private sector that is working that way, because you wouldn't work long. Look, we have a really important challenge. When we did Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, we had over a year to work on it, not several months. We were, at that time, we were not just looking to how we could fulfill campaign promises that made to the American people, but how we could still structure a business plan that in fact functioned. Things have changed. Things have changed. And so we're going through something altogether new right now. Look, people ask me about opportunity zones. I said, well, if you really want to know about opportunity zones, and this young man's sitting beside me, you all know it was the Erie downtown development that went to the White House to explain how opportunity zones worked, right? That's the model. They're the Wright brothers when it comes to aviation. When it came to this particular policy, this all came out of Erie, Pennsylvania. It started here. It flourished here. And people took a look at it. So people ask me, so what do you think is so brilliant about it? I said, it's not brilliant, it's math. And we're using the tax code to encourage private investment into areas that a smart investor would say, are you kidding me? No, nobody invests there. Why would you go there? It's a food desert. Look at the housing there. Look at the streets there. Look at the sidewalks there. You're asking me to go and invest there? Look at the neighborhoods. Why would I do that as an investor? Wise investors don't do that. But what wise investors do is take a look at when would it be in everybody's best interest to make investments in certain areas. By looking at the tax code, we encourage private investment, not using taxpayer dollars, but using private investment into areas that most private investors never would have ventured into. But it all started right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. It all started right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. And for some of you, and maybe you were there last spring when we did this, we actually, the chairman of Ways and Means right now, Jason Smith, had this idea that, you know what, it's time for us to take the Ways and Means Committee out of Washington and take it out into the country. And we went all over the country. The recap, at the end of last year when we were going over opportunity zones. So the chairman turned to me and said, Mike, I got to tell you, the trip to Erie was the most well-attended trip, had the most participation by the folks who live there of every place that we went. And I said, well, Chairman, the reason for that is they've already experienced it. They saw it firsthand. They saw when you talk about an investment. What about an investment that works for everybody and not just a few? By using the tax code, we got people to invest in areas they normally wouldn't invest. Now, when people ask, was there anything you'd improve on? I said, oh my gosh, yeah, there's a lot we should improve on it, because some people that were looking at, what does this mean? What's an opportunity zone, and why is it being left up to me to determine where the zone should be, where we're at? And I said, we fell short in being able to explain the opportunity of the opportunity zones. We fell short in explaining what kind of a zone should we be looking at. 16501 here, and everybody tells me that can't possibly be the poorest zip code in America. Surely I've looked around the country and there's places that are poorer, and we haven't been in 16501. And unless you've been there, touched it, felt it, really experienced it, it's hard to make a determination. It's not by any way casting any disparaging marks about that zip code. It's about talking in an area where there was very little investment and no reason for private investors to go there, okay? And I'm not being mean or nasty or saying, well, you mean that's all they're interested in is making money? And the answer is, yeah. Yeah, it's an odd concept. That's why we all invest. I don't know if anybody that goes to their investor and says, please put me in something where I can guarantee a loss. Look, I use the term when I'm in the Ways and Means Committee, I said, please, can we get away from all the tax codes? And please talk to me in real things. Please, these 3-letter acronyms or 4-letter acronyms. People speak in acronyms now, you know that, right? And you have to sit there and pretend like you know what they're talking about. I've several times had to stop me and say, listen, I hope I'm the only person in this room. I have no frickin' idea what in the hell you're talking about.
I say that all the time as well.
Yeah. Or they speak code. I said, that's interesting. So that's out of our tax code, right? And I go, yeah, sure. I said, well, okay, just take a minute and explain to the rest of the committee what that is. I said, well, it's 190. I said, no, I don't want you to. I want you to speak specifically about that part of it, because once you understand what the part is and what it means, then you can address it. And look, we're all going through an awful lot right now, right? I don't know about you, my grandkids. I always hand them the phone right now. I say, you have to decipher this for me. I mean, I can talk to your mother and your grandmother, but I can't go through the rest of the stuff that you guys do. Look, it's moving fast. It's moving fast, faster than we can keep up with. We do have, I know we're running out of time, so I have ask Melanie, she usually goes like this.
I'll do it for her this time. I wanted to get
to talk about, and everybody needs to do it, but everybody in this room, you already know it. You already know it. If you're in the private sector, you know it. You know it. What you need to do is have an opportunity to be more profitable, and you need to have a government that understands that the only way they prosper is if you prosper. And any failing is always pushed back on the private sector because they're just not paying their fair share. I said, okay, other than paying for everything, what share aren't we paying for? And then I said, well, come on. And I said, no, I've actually been there. So listen, it's good being with you. Brent, nice being on the phone with you today, buddy. You've got a strong opinion. So, and I appreciate it. But for the rest of the people up here, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat, okay? And people talk to me, well, I'm not a Republican, but I said, you're still an American, right? Well, what's that got to do with it? I said, because that's actually who I represent, 750,000 Americans. I don't, at least the last time I looked, in the district hasn't changed. There's not 745,000 Republicans only, is there?
No.
Yeah, okay. So I think we've got to get out of this cage that we're in this separating people by the party they're in, or the place they worship, or the neighborhood they live in, and say, look, you know what? Let's all pull as hard as we can together, and maybe we'll make this thing move. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate being with you today.
Thank you.
The time we spent last week was really good, too. Danny, good being with you, brother.
Thank you for that. we're going to keep it going on. Congressman Kelly mentioned opportunity zones, so I'm going to go into Christine next. As you know, Erie Insurance has really been a leader in our community for a lot of reasons, right? And specifically has been instrumental in helping with developing the Erie Downtown Development Corporation, and then kind of the catalyst behind it. But then also some of the growth now, they've seen firsthand that good policy, because this is what we're talking about, right? Where good policy can come. And I agree with the congressman, it doesn't matter where you fall politically. The reality is these are non-ideological things. These are pro-growth things, right? There's a real key difference. And we should be focusing on those things that unify. Opportunity zones is one of those. There's a couple other things I want to point out as we continue our conversation today that were included in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. A lot of times we think about the corporate net income rate, the corporate rate that was decreased and whether it'll move, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But there's a lot more to it. Opportunity zones, sunsetting of R&D, things like that. So with opportunity zones, Christine, could you tell us a little bit more, the things we've heard about for the last 6 years, but tell us about the leadership role Erie Insurance has taken, some of the community players that's been able to benefit, and kind of where you guys see this headed, down the road continuing.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, first of all, I mean, although Erie Insurance certainly has played and does continue to play a role, we would not be where we are as a community without everybody really weighing in and coming together and making Erie, Pennsylvania the beacon that it really has been and is in the OZ space. I think, Erie Insurance, we saw an opportunity early on with kind of a record time in terms of collaboration within the community to take advantage and figure out how we could leverage investment locally to secure external investment into our community. And we were able to do that and thankfully, could afford to do that and provide that kind of first in capital to be that leverage point to have a record amount of external investment in our community. And for us, the opportunity zones, I mean, they're not donations, right? It is an investment. As Representative Kelly noted, you want an investment to make money, but we can do so in a patient way. And I think the really unique thing about opportunity zones is it allows development to move at the pace of business, but it brings the community along with that development. So every community that's leveraged opportunity zones, I think if you look, they all do it a little bit differently. And that's because the needs are very different in all of those different communities. So in Erie, Pennsylvania, and in Erie County, there's a lot of different needs based on several plans that had been conducted over many years. We really looked at the Erie Refocused Plan with several local and experts from beyond as well, and really were advised, this is the plan that is the best first next step we can take. And so based on that, really putting resources behind that and trying to build out the downtown core, being not only where we are headquartered as a company, but where a place of critical mass is within our community, with the goal being over time to build out and connect to the neighboring areas. And we've certainly come a long way since the TCJA, but there's a long ways to go, and so we hope we'll have the opportunity to continue to do that.
Thank you so very much. We're going to jump over to Tom next, Mr. Treadway. Here we get an actual business owner's perspective on how these things have real-world impact. And something that Tom reminded me about was the R&D provision. And I think you're better equipped to explain it from your perspective than I am. But as we know in these bills, it's not just one thing. There's all these things that get stuck into it. And we think, well, it's well-intentioned, so it'll just get, he made the grave mistake, Lori, that he said, Congress will use common sense and just extend this because it just makes sense. As we know, common sense is few and far between when it comes to present company, excluded, of course. It's everybody else when it comes to doing these pro-growth positions. But Tom, could you explain to the audience about the R&D provision and why it's important, and just kind of a little more education to that side?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jesse. So the R&D tax credit provision was installed, I think, in like 1953 or 4. It's been around for over half a century. And what essentially allows any business to do is you categorize a certain amount of investments in research and development, you categorize it in that year, then you compare that to what you invested the following year, and essentially you get a credit they can use towards, to lower your tax burden. So makes sense, right? All Western countries do this. It's not an uncommon thing. It's something that incentivizes and promotes investment in automation, technology, all these things that are critical for any business, but in particular manufacturing, we're competing in a global economy to be competitive. Well, that all changed a couple of years ago. So the R&D tax credit still exists, but now what we're forced to do is amortize those expenses over 5 years. So a lot of R&D ends up being labor. It's actually not equipment. It's the people that I pay, that a lot of people pay to be engineers and to work on these types of initiatives. So now I got to take that, let's say I spent a couple $100,000 in payroll. I don't have to amortize that payroll over 5 years because I categorize that person as research and development. So now my tax burden goes up for those years because I can't expense it all at once. Suddenly it's changed the expense side of my P&L. So it disincentivizes R&D, and I mean I can't think of a worse time where to disincentivize any company to invest in research and development, into innovation, into the things that really are what going to set companies apart and what sets America apart as a global leader, is really innovation of research and development. So it's something I know that Congress has been talking about a while. It seems to get brought up now and again, and it just can't really get through. It seems to be something that has bipartisan support. I think Congressman Kelly would agree. Just need to get it really across that goal line, because until that gets changed back, we are less competitive as a country compared to other countries that have more common sense research and development tax policy.
We got to be careful using common sense when we're talking about the government. That's the second time I've heard it today. Even though it should be more common than it is. Shifting to Senator Laughlin, from a state perspective, and many of you already know this, so teeing it up, maybe an easy one here but the CRIS, right? This is new to Erie. But when we're talking about pro-growth policy, bipartisan policy, by the way, Senator Laughlin, you were instrumental, really since you got elected 6 years ago for the first time. I'm trying to get this over the line, and now it's here. Could you talk about I think a lot of people have some maybe misunderstandings of what that will do and how it will benefit the region. But could you talk about how that's going to directly impact businesses in this area and the process?
Desiree, and thanks for teeing up a softball right out of the gate. Look, I think a lot of the folks in this room know that I've been an advocate for the City Revitalization Improvement Zone since the day I was sworn in 8.5 years ago. It is going, at least in my opinion, going to be one of the most impactful things to happen to the city of Erie in the last 100 years. It is a tax incentive program that will, at least should, even right out of the gate, put $15 million into economic development efforts within this 130-acre footprint in the city. And for you business folks in the room that are thinking of investing in the city, pay attention here. You are allowed to have 5 CRIS dollars for every $1 that you put in. Now there's a ratio there. When the state looks at the investments that you are thinking about, obviously a 5-to-1 ratio, they might not love that, but that's the ratio. And that is probably the best tax incentive program in the country right now. So call your friends, tell them to invest in the city. Now, if I can have another minute here, Desiree, I'd also like to talk about a few of the things that we've done on the state level to make Pennsylvania more competitive when you're looking at the United States as a whole. And if you have companies that are either located within the United States and other states, or multinational corporations that are looking to onshore into the United States. Pennsylvania a few years ago was literally the worst place in the country to open a new business. It had the highest tax rate. Our C&I was 9.9. There was one other state that had a slightly higher rate than us. But we have significantly taken steps to reduce that. We're down to 7.99 now. In a few more years, we'll be at 4.99. But I think even more impactful than that is we've changed our net operating loss rules, and we were capped at 40%, which I'm assuming this affected you guys as well. And we are moving towards 80% by 2029, which will align with the federal rules. Now, those are some pretty significant tax advantages now that I would hope have people looking at Pennsylvania and saying, geez, they're open for business now. So that's been a big goal of mine, and I'm proud to have voted for most of these measures. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Laughlin. Congressman Kelly, I kind of want to actually focus on an additional item. some of your legislation that you've introduced recently, and maybe just kind of explain to our audience how it's important, why it's important, like how it'll affect them. But two things. Recently you introduced the American Innovation Act, as well as reintroduced the New Markets Tax Credit Extension Act. Could you tell us a little bit more about those pieces of legislation?
Yeah, well, they kind of speak for themselves, which is unusual for a piece of legislation. So in order to encourage people to do certain things, there need to be incentives. And too often, the scheme we work under is actually disincentivizing people to do things. So we talked a little bit about Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and what it did, but every one of these pieces that we're introducing are about pro-growth. For those of us who are in the private sector, I had mentioned that there's a couple of years I didn't pay any income tax because we lost money. By the way, that didn't let me walk away from wage taxes or real estate taxes or whatever tax it is you want to possibly look at. We get taxed in so many different ways that you think about all the time and ways you never think about. So if you're looking for things, if you're going to improve something, whether if healthcare, what are we always looking for? We're looking for a cure for something that's taking a hold of somebody and keeping them from leading a healthy life. So the idea in almost everything we do is if you get it early, you have a better chance of fixing it, right? Tax codes are based on everything that I've seen since I've got there was a disincentive for anybody in the private sector to invest. You were kind of being held captive to policy that had been in place years and years and years ago when the world was a different place. This is a global competition right now. I don't know any place else in the world that would look at our tax system and think, I think this is a good idea. Now, previous to Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and when we saw the revenues rise to the greatest level they had ever risen, with a lot of the talk beforehand is that this is terrible. This is terrible, and I don't want to go into some of the things here, but I'm constantly reminded that it's the rich that always get a break. But when you look at Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and you look at the very end, everybody got a break. We had more revenue than we ever had before. We had more companies picking up things that they never would have picked up before. So I would just ask, don't raise your hand. Think about the impact, your total economic impact when you provide health care, when you provide pensions, when you provide all. That takes the load off future taxpayers' backs, right? Now, we're never going to have enough revenue. I can just tell you that right now. Believe me, you pay your taxes, we'll find a way to spend it. As I always keep going, but it's all math. You can't keep working in the negative and think that somehow this is going to be positive. Nobody minds investments that help everybody and play out pro-growth things. So everything that we've introduced is all common sense stuff. It's like you're sitting at home at your kitchen table and say, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? And that's okay until you get in some type of legislation and people say, yeah, but are you going to take credit for that? I said, no, I'll author it, but you're all going to be sponsors or co-sponsors. Why don't we take credit for that? And at that point, then everybody's a winner, and that's the way it should work. But I know you all run businesses. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That's the thing I think we've gotten away from, the common sense of how profitable businesses work, how successful families work, how successful communities work. It's all a joint effort by everybody who's there, who actually buys into it and says, at the end of it, may not see it today, but I'm going to see it over a period of time. So just everything that we're talking about that we do right now is based on tax code or incentivizing private investment or community investment that ends up as a positive for everybody involved, not just a certain sector.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to keep moving down the line. And as just a kind of a housekeeping reminder, if you have any questions, we're going to try and get a couple in at the end. Feel free to use those papers on the table, and then in a little bit, I'll have some of the staff members walk around and pick those up. Also, I reserve the right to veto anything I don't want to ask, and I'll just go back to my questions. But Christine, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about your guys' community priorities and the things that you're most excited about and what's on the horizon?
Thank you for that. A lot of things we're excited about. As Senator Laughlin noted, the CRIS is something we're very excited to see that come online. Within our department, we oversee a few different things within the company, as well as community and economic development, which obviously is external facing. So in that work, there's a lot of different kind of connection points that we tap into. So from a community perspective, I mentioned moving at the pace of business, yet incorporating the community and the neighborhood. So one of the things that we have in-house is the Thomas D. Hagen Fellowship Program, and that's a program focused on civic engagement where different members within our employee base can come together and work to help solve a community problem or address a community opportunity. This year, the cohort is focusing on BUILD, Community Development Corporation, and working with the various neighborhood groups to help advance development in a way that is reflective of really what those individual neighborhoods need. So looking at what our community needs as a whole, but really taking a very focused approach to ensure that everyone is at the table and everyone's voice and needs are heard and addressed. In addition to many other development projects, that's one of our main areas of focus right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Tom, as we're going down the line, I'm going to sandwich kind of two things here. When the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act first rolled out in 2017, there was a lot of pushback in the media, surprise, right, on what it did and what it didn't do. And I think there was a lot of misinformation put out there. And so we took the opportunity to survey our members. For those of you who are not as familiar with our membership footprint, the MBA has members in 54 counties across the state of Pennsylvania. So yes, we are physically headquartered up here in Erie, but it gives us a really good swath when we do these surveys to get a really good sense of where the business community pain points are, what they're feeling, and it kind of goes across geographic locations. With that, we heard how different things about what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act actually did. What we surveyed found out over our 2,000 members was the top 3 things, I'm teeing this up for you, Tom, here, that we surveyed our members on how that affected their operations. The top 3 vote getters were invested into their company, purchased new equipment, or gave bonuses and raises to their employees. We heard a lot that it only helped the top 1%. To me, that sounds like it helped a lot of employees. So my question for you, Tom, is, was that consistent with how it affected your guys' operations, was being able to incentivize, new purchases, your people? And then my second question, to kind of piggyback on there, to sneak a second one on you, is what are some of the biggest barriers that you guys face that you just think the elected folks need to know? So, 2-part.
Yeah, so, all of the above of what the survey told you. It provided real tangible benefits for our company. Since 2017, we've never invested. It's a record amount of investment we put back into our business. For us, over $7 million, which is a big number for us, and it really, that accelerated depreciation, it incentivized us, made it easier to make those decisions when it comes to investing in automation and technology and all the stuff that we really need to be a competitive manufacturer. It allowed us to put more the QBI deduction gave us more money, more cash flow to put people through training. We use local training institutions here. Through apprenticeship programs, we saw many people come in as entry level. They're now process technicians, a highly skilled job that pays great wages. And again, because we had more money to put back into those people. And then we've never seen, especially at the entry level, we've almost doubled our entry level rates since then. And again, that's because we've been able to be successful. We've been able to invest into our company because of that accelerated depreciation. It wasn't all because of that, but it definitely factors in. And then of course, if you give businesses a lower tax rate, good business owners are going to put that money back into the business as opposed to the government spending it instead. And we certainly did that. So again, real tangible benefits for us. And as far as the second question, workforce is the first thing that comes to mind. Anything to help reinvest in our workforce. I think we're all looking for good people in manufacturing. I'm probably biased, but I think in particular, I'm really concerned looking at the next 5 to 10 years where we find some of these skilled trades to work at our factory. And I think that, if you just take, businesses thrive in certainty, right? I think Congress really needs to solidify and make permanent the TCJA. It gives us confidence to invest in our people, into technology, into our plant and growth. And allowing part of it to sunset, it doesn't just raise our taxes, it also injects some uncertainty at a time that I think it really couldn't be a worse time to inject that uncertainty. So it just, again, can't argue strongly enough to make these changes permanent, give us more certainty so we can just play the game without the rules changing.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Senator Laughlin, I'm going to kind of maybe two-part yours as well to try and get through some of these before we get questions from the audience. You know, we mentioned, and you actually already mentioned about PA did have the highest corporate net income tax. They've now started to reduce that from its near 9.1% down to 4.99, but it won't hit till 2031. It's not 2031. We still have some years till we get there, right? Obviously, there's a need to lower it. Do you think, my first part of the question is, there is a reality that that will accelerate? There's been some conversation about it. Some people have campaigned about it, but now it's, all right, campaign's over. I'm not saying you, I'm saying some powers that be. Do you think that's actually going to happen, too? And then my second part of my question is beyond tax policy. We're talking about a lot of that, and outside of maybe a few of us, that might not be as interesting. What is some of the things, what policy changes do you see would be the most impactful that would have a direct impact to help businesses thrive? So two-parter there.
Thank you, Judge Ray. A couple things. There's a Senate bill right now that was sponsored by Senator Greg Rothman that I'm a co-sponsor of that would expedite the reduction of our CNI by a couple of years. So we're at least working towards that. But I will tell you this too. What we have seen in the state of Pennsylvania, much like when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, by lowering taxes on our corporations, it actually increases revenue because there's more activity. And I've said this analogy before, but I'm going to say it again. And I see my buddy Jim Martin in the back. Maybe this will be your headline, Jim. When you tax businesses, it is like spraying Roundup on jobs. And I want you to think about that for a minute, right? You can't have good family-sustaining jobs without businesses that are thriving. It's just a symbiotic relationship. It's gone on since the dawn of time. So everything that we do that can make a business more profitable and doing better is good for the citizens as well. It's not this is a break just for you and it's not for the workers. It's all tied together. And a lot of people lose sight of that. And I'm very proud that Pennsylvania is becoming more competitive, which helps our families, it helps our school districts, it helps our workers, it helps everybody across the spectrum in Pennsylvania. And that needs to be put out there a lot more often because, when you're out and you're just talking to our constituents, and I'm sure Mike has this as well, you're just giving a tax cut to the wealthy. Well, that's a little partly true, but we're doing that so their businesses can thrive, to have better wages and jobs for the people that work there. You can't have one without the other. So, very proud to be working on that. And what was the second part of that question?
We're talking about the CNI rate reduction.
Oh, wow, I kind of covered some of that. But honestly, we can do this. It's not really that difficult. You just need to get people in a room that have some common sense and have a kind of a shared vision of what's best for Pennsylvania. And it's not really my job to promote the other side of the aisle, really. But I'm going to give a little shout out right now to Governor Josh Shapiro. I disagree with him on some things, obviously, but he is on board with lowering our corporate net income tax rate because he knows that it's good for Pennsylvania. So I think when cooler heads prevail, we can get good things done for our state, from my level, and for the country at the congressional level. So I appreciate the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, Senator. If you have two things, if you do have any questions written down, if you could just kind of pop that up, Sean and maybe Davina, if you wouldn't mind, or anyone else from AFP, just kind of put those in a pile and bring them up this way. And then I'm going to shameless plug while they're doing that. Tom mentioned about he was able to have more money for training and putting back into his employees. Really convenient. We do a lot of training here at the MBA, and maybe you've already participated in that. And if you don't, you should totally give me a call and I'll hook you up. We do all kinds of training here for your employees, and growth and supervisory skills and some really great stuff. And I'll pitch it again at the end. So I'm only giving you the sales pitch now because Tom mentioned it. Congressman Kelly, as we're continuing to go down the line, you did mention the national tour that you did with Chairman Jason Smith from the Ways and Means. And I'm kind of curious, kind of two-part as well for you, is one, what did you really learn that maybe you didn't expect? going from all over the towns. And I was present for the hearing that we had in Erie, up in the Warner Theater. That was really cool. That was awesome for Erie to have something like that hosted here. So what did you learn? And then I guess the second part is, I think there's a reality that people need to know about, is what are the realities if some of these provisions do sunset here and we are not able to get this thing over the finish line, as far as if the Congress is unable to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So things we learned from our travels, and then what's the reality of things that will sunset?
I think as far as what do we learn from our travels, everybody represents a certain district, and they're very familiar with their district. They're not really familiar with other people's districts. So when we start off and we go to Oklahoma, or we go to New York, or then we go down to Florida, and then we go up to Wisconsin, you get a chance to see what other people are facing. And there's a lot of similarity to it, but by the same token, there's a lot of things that you learn for the first time. I think when we went out into the country, now I'm not talking about rural areas or urban areas, I'm talking about out into the entire part of the United States. It's interesting that we share a lot of the same concerns, but there's another thing we share, and I think it's not talked about enough, and it's that we are such a unique nation. The one thing that I think any of us who been serving, how blessed we are to be in the nation that we're in and representing the people we represent. Not only that, but I always think back, there's 1.5 million men and women in uniform that died to give us this opportunity to meet here today in an open forum and talk to each other. I really get discouraged when I hear people talking badly about the country. It makes no sense to me at all. It makes no sense to me at all. But you can develop, then you can put fences between yourself and somebody else because of something that somebody said. And you look at that and say, that's not who we are. That's not who we ever were. I mean, we're constantly developing. We're never fully developed. We're constantly developing. I think it's good to get out of your comfort zone and get to other places and see what people have to do and see what they do and say, you know what, okay, fine. That's fine. You put all 50 together, there's no place else in the world that can beat it. When we can't get 50 together, we're totally vulnerable to everybody. The world is safe when America is strong. It's just that simple. I use this example, maybe you can go through this with me. Anytime there's a disaster, any place on the globe, mudslide, some kind of a volcano, some kind of earthquake, anything, who's the first responder? America. America. You don't have to go back too far. Go back to the fall months and say, my gosh, what happened down in Tennessee and the Carolinas? And good Lord, we lost complete towns, we lost infrastructure, we lost everything, we lost the future for all those people that lived there. You go to California. We burnt, an entire neighborhood burns down the ground. Go to Hawaii. And my question is, so, gosh, when we put our shoulder to the wheel and we're all showing up for that, you look around and you find out there's nobody there but you and Canada. There's nobody else around the world that says, you know what, gosh, they helped us and we were in trouble. We got to go help them. That's not the way the rest of the world feels. They feel we've been so blessed for so long that we can do it ourselves. And we need to share more with the rest of the world because they've had more benefits than we've had. There's some benefit about being a self-governing nation that is absolutely incredible. So when I look at all those things, I think more than anything else, you become so much not a more rigid Republican or stronger Democrat. You need to become a more open-minded American as to where it is you're trying to go. But unfortunately, we live in an area or a time when my wife, when I get home, and I don't just share it, I hope you guys don't go through this, and you really just don't go through this. I get home and she's watching some opinionate people on TV that sell advertising. That's how they make a living. They're not journalists. They're opinionate people. And I sit and listen to this and say, that's interesting. That has nothing to do with what's really going on. They must have taken a survey to see who was watching because it just drove their price per point up when it came to advertising. There's so much bad information out there. Do you know that in your elected office, nobody can lie to you? Nobody can lie to you. They can say anything about you that they want. And you can do nothing about it because we have freedom of speech. I'm more fixed on responsible speech than freedom of speech, yes, as long as it's responsible. So much of what we go through, and we're gathered here today because you all live in the same place, you all live in the same world, and to me it's astounding that we have become so divided. Is there anybody in the room considering moving to someplace else on the globe? Because this is such a terrible, terrible country. You have to get out of here with your wife and your kids and your husband, or please get them out of here as soon as you can. This is a horrible place. Right, nobody's leaving. Nobody's leaving, everybody's staying. We have become so self-critical, we forget sometimes that just thank God that 1.5 million men and women in uniform have died to give us this opportunity to disagree. Just keep it low. Don't get all fired up. Don't get ready to burn down something. I think that the time I've been in Congress, more than anything else, I've noticed more than I wanted to notice the division that's taking place between the two parties. We do a lot of legislation with other members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat. That never gets featured. The only thing that gets featured is when we have a disagreement. So, I know Danny goes through that. We all go through the same thing. We get elected office, you go through that. And just, I like it when you get everybody together like this, because I hope that on your way home, just think a little bit about where you are and what you're doing. And whenever it works for all of us. And when it doesn't work, it works for none of us. And you know, and I mean this sincerely, there's nobody else in the world responding to anything horrible that goes on in the world than America. It's just true. That's why it's so important for us to be the strongest nation in the world economically, because everybody eats out of our trough. And when it's empty, it's empty. So that's my only message on all this. I mean, really, we're going to talk a lot of policy, but as long as it's pro-growth policy and pro-American policy, I have no problem. I don't give a damn if it's a Republican piece or a Democrat piece. Why would that matter? I don't represent 754,000 Republicans. I represent 754,000 people who live in Pennsylvania 16. I think it's time to take a look at that. And I think you all get here and said, that's just political rhetoric. I would love to trade seats with you. I would love to trade seats with you. Not for a day, for a session. And find out how much you thought you agreed with somebody, and how much you found out afterwards they were with you till it came time to vote on it. That's the real measure. That's the real measure. Look, there's certain things.
Jump in on that.
No,
just a second, Mike.
No, yeah, but you're both did the same thing. It's so different.
What he just said is very important. I'm going to point this out for everybody in the room. The only thing that I or Mike have when we go to the Capitol, whether it's the DC Capitol or the state Capitol, is our word. That's what matters down there. Because when what he said about someone told you they're with you on that vote until it came time to cast a vote, I can tell you this, I have never done that to any other member, and I don't believe Mike has either. Because when you go to a place like DC or Harrisburg, your word means that's it. Your word is your bond. You can put anything you want in writing. If they can't trust you, they can't trust you. And that's very important. So thanks for bringing that up, Mike.
No, I mean,
Yeah, thanks for that. And I do want to get to just a couple of questions. We're almost at the end of time. And so,
you want other panelists to have a chance to talk? I'm sorry. I'm kidding. No.
I'm going to try to at least get to one question. I want to be respectful and get everyone out of here when we promised you all. But from the audience questions, we'll keep this one brief. This one's for Senator Laughlin, and then maybe we'll wrap it up here. An energy-related question, Senator. It says, energy is a significant cost in manufacturing. What's being done to address electrical costs through the utilization of our natural resources? 2 points included here says increase in electricity consumption through reshoring and data centers. Second point says environmental regulations curtailing natural gas footprint. So energy, significant costs in manufacturing. I know we just had a thing with the Public Utilities Commission here a few months ago. If you talk about what the state's doing.
Look, this is a topic that I've covered quite a bit, Desiree, over the last few years. When I'm down in Harrisburg, I like to point out to my fellow senators that Erie, Pennsylvania still has a very large manufacturing base. Matter of fact, if I'm rounding the numbers off correctly here, roughly 17% of the people that live in Erie County work in manufacturing, which is about 10 points higher than the average across the state. So energy is very important to my district. And when we do, not me personally, but I say we as a legislature, When we do things like put a carbon tax on our energy sector, and it's not, let me get to that in a second here, but when we do a carbon tax on our energy sector, right, all we're doing is taking money from our manufacturers and making them less competitive. We make our manufacturers less competitive when we raise their energy prices. So no matter how you feel about the climate, if we kill the jobs locally and the jobs go to China, China burns coal right out of a straight pipe, and it's bad, it's even worse for the planet than the regulations that we have in place here. So we have to be very mindful of when we turn a dial here to try and clean something up, if it sends our jobs overseas, in the end, all we did was screw the environment and screw our workers that live here in Pennsylvania and really screw our businesses over. So, you know, I'm always willing and open to have conversations with anybody about our environment. I'm a staunch advocate for clean water and clean streams and clean air, right? But you have to balance that with the greater good of what you're doing for your environment, your economy, and your workers that live in this state and in this country, as a matter of fact. So you can't, and I'll put this out there too, you know, because I have people that call my office and send me emails and whatnot and talk about alternative energy. And I've been the prime sponsor of some of our alternative energy bills as well. But we're running at about 5% of our entire production comes from renewables. We can't just shut off our coal, gas, and nuclear power plants. We can't do it. And if we do, you know, we've closed a few coal plants in Pennsylvania over the last few years. Our grid right now is running at a razor-thin margin to where if we're not careful, we will not be able to keep the lights on in Pennsylvania. And that is going to skyrocket your rates. And that will make every manufacturer in this room way less competitive, and China will be eating our lunch. So thanks for bringing that up, Jezreel.
That was a question from the audience there. So I don't have time to get to all the questions in my 43 pages worth of notes and prep that I did for today. But in closing, I'm going to do an unexpected rapid fire question, starting with Christine. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
Very quick answers, and we're going to wrap it up. But as it relates to opportunity zones and, you know, the footprint where your insurance is and downtown and all that stuff, what's your favorite spot within opportunity zones that people should know about?
My favorites, well,
Or thing to do?
Favorite thing to do, I'm a foodie, so I will say the food hall. Definitely check it out, and the country fair will be opening there pretty soon as well. So that's my answer.
I have to agree with that strongly. Tom, I'm so sorry to put you on the spot, but what are you excited about for the summer?
What am I excited about? That it's not winter? I don't know. No, I mean, I guess I'll throw it back to. I mean, I'm excited to take my kids down to, you know, down to Perry's Monument, down to all the fun stuff going on in the city of Erie that we've been able to invest in, and having them see all the culture, all the vibrancy that's down there. So.
Great answer. And to the Congressman's point about people leaving the country, I was never considering leaving the country, but I kid you not, 2 months ago, I may have had a conversation about North Carolina with my wife. Because of the snow. It was a snow joke. Senator Laughlin, what is a local business within your district that people should know more about? That's a hard one.
You're seriously going to make me pick a business amongst all these businesses?
One person wins, everybody else.
I'm going to
Food's always safe.
I'm going to freestyle this just a little bit here, guys, right?
Typical.
Go off topic.
Stop. Right here.
Hughes is only 9 miles south of Mill Creek Mall.
That works.
Yeah.
Hey, all kidding aside, I got concrete coming at 2 o'clock, so I got to wrap it up there.
Let's go. And last question, and then we're going to wrap this up. Congressman Kelly, all right, I'm so sorry I put you on the spot, but it's my absolute favorite thing in the world, and anyone that knows me knows what I'm going to say next. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Sorry to get personal.
I've tried just about everything, and I think when I go home, I always go over. The last time I was there, I got something called cotton candy, but I made a mistake. I got it in a dish this time instead of the cone. And so when I got home, my wife got in the car with me. She said, "Were you eating ice cream somewhere because the dish is still here?" I said, "No, that was from a long time ago." No, I usually that's my stop on the way home.
Yeah.
So I always jump off, go up there, get something, hurry up, get in the car, run back home. But it's my favorite spot. And, you know, you just kind of ride along. You're like you're a teenager again. You're eating ice cream and you're listening to the radio. And I only have the 60s on 6 on. And people say, why? I said, because one of my favorite times was going to my senior prom. I like to get back in that area because it was just such a comfortable place for me because of my parents and everybody come before. But yeah, I like to stop at the ice cream place and pick up some ice cream. I won't use the name because then I'll get accused of trying to push it. But if you're going, no, I'm kidding. Yes, having some ice cream at the end of the day, that's my deal.
So no on the flavor then. Going with cotton candy?
No, you know what? The only one I've stayed away from is peanut butter.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I like the other one. So
Sorry for pushing.
I've had cake batter.
I want to thank everyone.
Wait, I'm not done.
Listen, I'm getting better and better at this. At least Dr. Oz isn't screaming at me like happened the last time. So I ended up in a Dave McCormick commercial of him yelling at me when we were up here. It was all sorts of exciting. Put it as my ringtone, drove my wife crazy. But I wanted to thank everyone for being with us today. Could you join me in a round of applause for our esteemed panel today?
Good being with you again. You guys are.
And before you all leave, well, I still have your attention for 30 more seconds, 2 plugs and a shout out. Our plugs is next Tuesday, if you're not already signed up, because I think we have a few spots maybe available, is our AI Summit. We're really excited about it. We have some really high-level speakers that are coming in from different parts of the area and around the state and the country, quite honestly, to speak about innovations in AI, how it's going to affect your business, what to be looking for, how you can prepare, and just what you need to know. If you want to register, give us a call, hit me up. I think there's probably a QR code on the table. And then my other plug is our next executive speaker series, which is on May 8th. We've been having an amazing turnout and some really great topics on that. This one's going to be specifically manufacturing leadership. Our guest will be John Yarmouth, the president from Channel Lock in Meadville, the general manager from Erie's Magnetics, the CEO of Snap-Tight Hoses, and the aerospace and defense business manager from Parker Lord. So you are not going to want to miss that. And my very last shout out, I'm right ahead of you, is to thank our friends from AFP for sponsoring everyone's lunch. I hope you enjoyed it. Get something on their way out if you didn't get something to eat yet. And if you want to, tell me what that says real quick. I can't read the black from here.
QR code to tell your congressman to support tax cuts and jobs.
That's how we're wrapping it up. Please scan the QR code to tell your congressman to support extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for your time today. Please go enjoy that sun out there, and we'll see you here soon. Have a good day.
That's it.